It's not your grandfather's Pape-Dawson for sure.
Oh, he tells us every day we're running the company into the ground. I mean, he said, "This is the end of Pape-Dawson."
Welcome to the AEC Growthcast from PSMJ Resources, hosted by President Gregory Hart. This no theory, no fluff episode shares real takeaways from the top AEC experts who know what works in today's competitive market.
Hello, welcome to the AEC Growthcast brought to you by PSMJ Resources. My name is Greg Hart, President at PSMJ, and your host. In every episode that we have on this broadcast, we're going to be sharing actionable tips, advice, insight, data, you name it, all focused on improving the business performance of architecture, engineering, construction organizations. I hope that's why you're here, because that's what you're going to get. I couldn't think of a better first episode than one that is a remarkable growth story of Pape-Dawson Engineers. Pape-Dawson, you may have thought of them as kind of a regional Texas firm, or maybe had never even heard of them 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Originally a one office, then a 3-office Texas-based firm. Now 2,000 employees, 41 offices over multiple states, $500 million in revenue. Just a remarkable success story. I sat down with Trey Dawson, who's the third generation of Dawsons, which is another remarkable factor in their story. Trey became president of the firm a little over a year ago, and he has a fascinating story. We're going to talk about all the different facets of growth and how they've navigated that. Let's jump into my conversation with Trey. Hope you enjoy it. Welcome, Trey Dawson, president of Pape-Dawson Engineers. Trey, thanks so much for joining me here today to catch up a little bit.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah. You know, Pape-Dawson's a firm that at PSMJ we've worked with quite a bit over the years, long before, certainly long before me, maybe long before you.
Absolutely. Long
As
before.
well. So the legacy is deep, but you know, I couldn't think of a better firm to talk about when we kind of morph what was our $10,000 hour PSMJ Pro broadcast into the AEC Growthcast. I thought, what firm is more synonymous with growth than Pape-Dawson? So I think this will be a lot of fun. I want to talk a little bit about a lot of stuff that's gone into the growth trajectory that's created Pape-Dawson who it is today. It's a 69 on the ENR 500 in 2025. 2026 may be higher, but I don't want to jinx anything here. So I think it'll continue to go. But that's up 43 spots in just 2 years, which is amazing. So certainly a firm now with 41 offices, kind of well beyond Texas, and really diversified in kind of every way that you can think of. Execute a lot of the stuff that we talk about in a lot of our programs here at PSMJ, a lot of the training that we do. So 13 out of the past 14 years in PSMJ's Circle of Excellence. So if you are familiar with our annual AE Financial Performance Benchmark Survey Report, which is a veritable boat anchor of KPIs on virtually every metric you can think of in AEC firm performance, the Circle of Excellence is the top 20% across 9, what we've deemed to be the kind of the most critical KPIs. So, you know, certainly looking at things like revenue factor, you know, direct labor multiplier with utilization. We're looking at turnover rate. We're looking at revenue growth rate. 9 factors across a lot of different dimensions in profitability, efficiency, cash flow. We look at the balance sheet a little bit with AR collections. So it's not just an award that recognizes growth or size or anything like that. It's an award that recognizes long-term sustainable growth.
Wondering what happened that one year. I don't remember that. Did you not have the award that year?
I'm sure that must have been it. No, it was. I think it was the COVID years. I think it was right in that like 2020, 2020. It may even have been that you didn't even participate in the survey that year. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll say that happened. We'll say that's what it was. We are blessed to get a lot of awards throughout the year, but that is absolutely one of, if not the most important to us, because it comes down to stability for our employees, and that's what being in the Circle of Excellence means to us.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I definitely agree. You know, it's very strategic and engineered to recognize exactly that kind of sustainable growth, sustainable high performance, and not be over-indexed on any one thing like profit or growth or just. So we'll put a link to the Circle of Excellence Awards. You can see what those 9 metrics are and how to enter. There's no charge to enter. You just participate in our financial performance survey, and you're automatically entered to win that award, which is determined over the summer. I can't think of any other firms that have had this kind of ride. And really, you're the third generation. It was started by your grandfather, right? And you're no pressure, but you're the third generation here to take the reins. So that family legacy and heritage is also something. See that in a lot of smaller firms, but not a firm that's reached what you guys have done.
I'm third generation Dawson at Pape-Dawson. Pape-Dawson was founded by my grandfather and Gus Pape in 1965 in San Antonio, Texas. So we just celebrated our 60-year anniversary actually here in August. I think we sent out an email for it. We didn't do a big party or anything. We've got too much work going on for that. But that's where I am today. I'm in San Antonio. That's still where our headquarters are. And their first office was right down the road. But really, for the first 40 years of Pape-Dawson's existence, say from 1965 to 2005, we were a San Antonio land development company. And not really diversified in service areas, not diversified geographically. Well, in 2005, we started to expand geographically, and first in Texas. We went to Houston and then Dallas, Austin, all organically, just one person at a time. We started Houston with one person in 2009 and now have about 400 people there. We started Dallas with one person, Austin, and then some smaller communities around Texas. And then also over the last 20 years expanded into the public sector, water and transportation, DOT, TxDOT is our biggest client at the company. And then I think around 2022 we felt like we had pretty good market share in Texas. We were especially in land development, one of the top firms from single family lot standpoint, one of the top firms for commercial platted acreage, 5 firm with the Department of Transportation. So all kind of, looked around at each other and said, well, what's next? Texas has been very good to us. It was a great place to start, but we were brave enough to kind of, go across state lines. We had seen firsthand expanding organically is very tough. One person, especially in markets where no one knows you.
Yeah.
And so we thought a better strategy outside of Texas would be expanding through M&A and mergers and acquisitions instead of the open an office one person at a time kind of strategy. Well, since that time in 2022, really about 2.5 years ago, we have partnered with 15 companies, mainly in Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee, one that has an office in Kansas and Arizona, and then a few more acquisitions in Texas. We are still, opening offices organically. Savannah, Georgia was one of those last year. But we've kind of added M&A to our toolbox and doubled the size of the company in the last 2.5 years.
If you haven't been paying attention in the last few years, it's not your grandfather's Pape-Dawson for sure.
He tells us every day we're running the company into the ground. I mean, when our work from home policy came out, he's not as hard on me, but my dad and uncle, he sent them a text, and he's 91 right now.
Yeah,
He thinks a little differently than we do, but he said, this is the end of Pape-Dawson, work from home. What is this? This is ridiculous. I don't completely disagree, but I'm not quite on that end of the.
What's it like in the holidays? Is it a little pressure at the table around?
We have a strict no work policy when we're outside of work. So no, one of the really joys of my job is I do get to work for my family. Surprisingly, and no one ever believes me when I say this, we all get along very well. My dad is chairman of the company right now. My uncle is CEO. As you mentioned recently, became president here at the end of 24. But it really is fun getting to work with all of them. We all are very different and kind of balance each other out. But as you would expect with being in a family business, we've got a lot of important decisions to make on a daily basis, and everybody kind of brings a unique idea and perspective to the table with each one of those decisions. But we really respect everyone's thoughts and input.
Was it a foregone conclusion that you were going to come into the business? Tell me about your trajectory.
There wasn't really just like a moment where I decided I was going to do engineering. It was always just kind of known. I always wanted to do it. I liked math and science, can't spell, to save my life. So I liked math and science. So I did get an engineering degree from Texas Tech. Got a master's in transportation as well in around 2008. And of course, interned with the company for many summers, since whatever the legal age to intern is, that's what we'll say my age was, but it was probably younger. But worked in the survey crew for many summers, and then moved into the office and the print shop, and a designer in AutoCAD, and then an engineer and a project manager. And if you have the right last name at Pape-Dawson, you can work your way to the top. That's what happened to me. So I've been really blessed, been surrounded by some amazing people.
And so president for a little over a year.
Yeah.
How's that been?
It's been great. I think really in any position, when you're promoted into a position, you really should have already been doing the job that you're promoted into for a little bit of time. And, I've kind of been groomed my whole life for this. So even from a young age after school, was fortunate enough to kind of be pulled into management meetings and executive meetings, and, meetings on HR and IT and finance, and the kinds of things that probably your normal person in early 30s or even early 40s are not involved in. So I would say that the transition has been pretty seamless.
How are you getting some Pape-Dawson DNA into those acquisitions? How's that all worked from the benefit of diversification, but also the challenge?
We are a diversified company where we place a lot of value in that. We're about 60% private and 40% public. And, that's not by accident, that's by design. We kind of view that as, your stocks and bonds, your investment portfolio, because you have your private sector, which is higher profit, a little more volatile. And then you have your public sector, which is less profit, but less volatile. But it does allow us to kind of move people around. It seems like when land development or private sector slows down, we'll move people over into the sector, the transportation or water teams. When DOT funding slows down, we might have to ship some people over to the private sector. That really helped us during COVID. We do a lot of single family land development. And, back then I was doing real work, doing engineering. And I remember, getting a lot of calls from Lennar and D.R. Horton and KB Homes and Pulte, all the big production builders, and they slowed down for a couple of months. And well, we all saw, what happened after that. It was an incredible boom. But during that time, we were able to move, people over to the public sector, and that's provided a lot of value to us. And, the public sector is very tricky. There's a lot of big, sophisticated firms that are going after the public sector jobs. They're hard to win. The public sector is very different, more regional type firms.
Sure.
Still need to set yourself apart to win those jobs. But, you don't have teams and teams of marketing people and proposal assistants and graphic designers, working on RFQs. The business strategy for private sector is to do a good job on the last project, and pick up the phone when your client, calls you for the next one. And that's the business strategy for private sector there.
Yeah. You got a great balance going on there. So I'm sure some of the acquisitions have been on the private sector side, public sector side.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like most of the acquisitions of the smaller firms are private sector, but we are working hard to find those public sector firms, just so that we don't throw off our diversification too much.
Yeah, you bet.
And a lot of there's firms out there that do both, also
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you can acquire, and that's good as well.
Sure, yeah. And the footprint now is kind of Texas to Florida.
Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee predominantly. But great markets, high growth and business friendly, and those are lots of work there, lots of competition, but lots of work.
So where do we go from here?
There's a lot of firms in the Midwest. We've recently done, a study that I think of firms that would be within our wheelhouse and, that we could afford. There's probably about $3 billion of revenue there for us to go talk to and knock on their door. The West, is really pretty different than the, Southeast or the East. There's like 5 cities in the West. I mean, it's, if you don't count California, I mean, it's like Las Vegas and Salt Lake City and Phoenix and Denver, and everything else is like desert or mountains. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's very different than the Southeast and Florida. So I think the West would be in our sights pretty soon as well.
Sure, yeah. And as you grow, do you see bigger acquisitions, or is it still you kind of get your sweet spot in the types of acquisitions?
Yeah, the bigger acquisitions, they're a little more sophisticated from a back of house standpoint. So you do have to pay, a little bit more for them. Anybody that fits culturally with us and that does what we do, it would interest us. We're very unlikely that we would go out and do an acquisition of somebody if the services don't line up pretty well with us. We're being pretty diligent on sticking with firms that do what we do.
I do want to talk a little bit about culture because that's something that would be the first question as you grow. That would your grandfather walk through the door and say it's a very different culture now than it was when I was here? Even your dad might say it's a different culture. But the other big piece is one of the biggest bottlenecks to growth still for a lot of firms is finding talent and keeping top talent. Even in markets, there are some pockets of the economy that are starting to cool a little bit. But for a whole bunch of reasons, right? I mean, this is still an industry that's starved for talent. That's one of the things I've really admired about Pape-Dawson is the ability to have just a amazing team of smart folks and relatively low, like I mentioned, turnover rate. What are kind of some of the mistakes you see that others make with talent, or some of the things that allow you to keep that turnover rate low?
Yeah, well, to grow any company, you have to bring people in the front door. But at that same time, you have to protect the back door. And
Mhm.
you can't just hire somebody and then next day you lose somebody. Well, then you didn't move. Obviously, we got to about 1,000 people before we started expanding outside of Texas. If you have 10% turnover, you're automatically going to lose 100 people a year. So if you want to grow by 100 people, you have to hire 200, which means you have to interview 500. And for us, the model it got very difficult. I think the important thing on talent is that don't. A lot of times you're just very busy, and it can be tempting to hire that first person that you interview. Or maybe to kind of settle for somebody that maybe is not a perfect fit. And I think you do have to be patient. I don't think, but you can't be cheap on what you want to pay people. You have to pay for talent. Usually the more you're willing to pay, the better talent you will get. It's funny how
Mhm.
that works. But I think don't get tempted with the first candidate. You have to offer incredible benefits and protect the back door. And that's kind of our strategy for getting and retaining talent.
Yeah, sure. You probably found some great talent through acquisitions too. And I'm sure a lot of junior and mid-level folks in acquisitions see the sale of the firm as a great opportunity to create some career paths. You invest a lot in training and development
Mhm.
and growth of talent, which I think would just be a really attractive opportunity for younger talent and
Yeah,
acquisition.
that is what I like most about doing M&A is, I mean, we're bringing on just some incredible people, some incredible leaders. They're bringing new ideas to Pape-Dawson. Doing an acquisition doesn't always mean the bigger firm is going to integrate, the smaller firm into them. We're taking ideas and best practices from some of those companies and implementing processes that previously applied to 50 or 100 people, and we're rolling them in to Pape-Dawson. So that has been one of many benefits with the acquisitions.
Yeah, we have one of our clients who's grown quite a bit through acquisition and got quite large. If you look at their leadership team on their website, probably half of them came through acquisitions that are now executives on the leader executive committee of the firm,
Yep, yep.
and came up through
And that's the
acquisition.
same with our website as well. We have two tabs, and you could go there and see the leadership of those individuals. But we rely on them to help us run the company.
Let's talk a little bit about the client side because that can be something you worry about a little bit. You never want the client to say, "Hey, they ain't what they used to be." They've grown and they're inwardly focused and a little slower and whatnot. Tell me a little bit about on the client side, some of the things that clients value most about Pape-Dawson and how you remain kind of that firm of choice.
Our mission statement is to be the most respected professional services firm in our geographic and technical areas of practice. That's been our mission statement for many decades. It's not the biggest or the fastest growing or the one with the most revenue or the best KPIs. It's simply to be the most respected. And we do have 6 core values, and one of them is responsiveness. And on the topic of clients, a lot of times clients don't look at our plans. as hard as it is for an engineer to say that, they don't look at the construction plans. They don't know what they're supposed to look like, but they do know what a return phone call looks like. They do know what a return email is. Although it sounds pretty basic, of all of the core values that we could have, responsiveness is one of them, and that's one of the ways that we try to set ourselves apart. I think relationships, local relationships are really important to our clients. If there's a problem, are you going to be able to call the county engineer or the city engineer or the mayor or whoever? Are you going to be able to pull strings? If there's a problem, are you going to be able to fix it? Are you going to be able to get the permit? And a lot of firms can do that, but when there's a problem that comes up, are you going to be able to fix it? And know the region too. If a client needs an easement downstream, and you say, oh yeah, I work with all four of those property owners. So local knowledge is really important.
Some of this is just the truth with public sector work, but at 41 offices, you're kind of living that growing big by staying small. Even though you've grown to 2,000 people, you're still local offices with boots on the ground to move pretty quickly, at least from what I can tell.
Part of my, kind of town hall pitch that we give to the employees, we need to run Pape-Dawson like 100-person company. We have to get out of the way and let the regions run, and work is done and won locally. It's our job as executive leaders to kind of provide a platform where people, can succeed and can do that. But a lot of times they don't need our help, and that's fine. So, can't have too much red tape. And we know all of the firms that do. And there's a reason why they do. And you've got to respect that. When you're 30,000 people, you've got to have processes and stuff. Processes are important, but just be careful to not get too corporate.
Years ago, I spoke with the CEO of a firm that had just become publicly traded. And everybody commented to me, he's like, I never want our company to be a bunch of highly paid administrators. I always want it to be lean and client focused, and I think they've stuck to that too, which is great. Talk a little bit about that kind of operational discipline and focus during growth. How do you do that? How do you stay focused on this stuff as you get bigger? Y'all have more on your plates and more stuff going on. How do you just keep the team focused on where you're going and executing?
We've had to, grow up a little. We can't wing it anymore. You can't just make every decision, in a silo. You've got to have some processes. You got to have some policies, some standard operating procedures. We had to do a signature matrix and a records retention policy, and we still have a long way to go on our CRM. We're getting better at tracking workload and backlog. Of course, we were doing all that for a long time, but when you bring on 15 companies that all do it a different way, it's all about data. What we're seeing, the long lead item on integration of acquired firms is the ERP. We're on Vantage Point. Everybody knows it. Everybody has their challenges with it. There's positives and negatives of it, but we've had to kind of grow up a little bit. And we did a pulse survey for our employees a couple months ago. We do it every couple years. About half of them, they want more structure. They want to know, where's my source of truth for all of the information. I want to go to the employee intranet and be able to navigate and click on a document and just tell me what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do. So we're doing that, but we're walking a thin line, of not being too overbearing. We got to give our regions some freedom.
You don't want to prioritize kind of consistency over high performance. You don't want to sort of become this mediocre. Everything's the same, but it's not great. You know what I mean? I would bet your grandfather would hear all this talk about software and ERP and consistency and would just...
Yeah, please don't send him this. He'll kick me out of the family.
My guess is you each have a goal of kind of leaving the company better than you found it. It's each one of you kind of brought something to the table and brought the firm to that next, whatever that level is, maybe not necessarily even size, but just, more value, more impact, whatever the case may be. But all the while watching those core values, I'm sure just seems like, it's natural that now you have to kind of focus on things that your predecessors didn't necessarily have to, because that was it was a different time too. I mean, the way people consumed engineering services 20, 30, 40 years ago is very different than it is now. As you've grown, you've had to start delegating, create kind of this culture. I could easily see that being a bottleneck. If you guys were just kind of command and control, sort of had to be involved in every decision. You want to get involved in kind of setting policy and setting guidelines and be real into that, but back away on the execution of it. But that's probably been a challenge for you guys, right? To kind of stay out of that hero culture and not want to jump in when you see something that's not the way you would have done it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that we're kind of set up, we have a COO of Texas, Michael Price. He's worked for us for about 20 years. And then Kara Tackett is also worked for us for about 25 years, our COO of expanding markets, essentially everything outside of Texas. They're my right-hand people. Michael's in Houston. Kara's in San Antonio. Kara used to run our water resources group, and Michael used to run our Houston office. Really, he was the one hire that we made. I mentioned Houston went from 1 to 350 organically. Michael was the person that did that. But one of the things that's really unique about Pape-Dawson, you mentioned hero culture. We do not have profit centers at Pape-Dawson. No one is compensated off of, the revenue that their team does or what projects they get. We are just one team across the board. And of course, we have KPIs and scorecards for the group so that, the managing principals can run their business units. But we want to compete externally. We don't want to compete internally. And when you're bonusing people off of individual or team performance, they're going to be inclined, as human nature, to act in the best interest of themselves or their team, not in the best interest of the company. So the way that we kind of overcome the hero culture is through the no profit center mentality. And we do a lot of work share. We do a lot of cross-selling. But when somebody in Tennessee wins a job, somebody in San Antonio or in the panhandle of Texas, they see that and they say, wow, that's great for me. That's just as good for me as it is the person that won that job. And I don't know how you would have an atmosphere of teamwork and collaboration without that mentality. Leadership, we do have career roadmaps for about 80% of our employees. We're working on the last 20%, but everybody knows, kind of what their career path is. They know what they need to do to get to the next level. This has been a huge lift and kind of a priority of mine this year. And then, as far as getting to the next level, for our employees, we have a document. We call it Excellence in Action, and it's kind of the 30 kind of principles of Pape-Dawson on what you need to do. Get approval to work without a signed contract. All that kind of boring stuff. But those are kind of the tools we've given our leaders to be able to succeed.
And it seems like that probably flows through into project management too. That you have a box and you have some guidelines. We're not going to prescribe every last detail of what you should do, but you give them the guidelines and the guidance and the direction, right? And that's much more scalable.
Yeah, it's hard to have, these steadfast, line in the sand rules.
Sure.
For everyone, because every team is different, every geography is different. Our clients from city to city have different expectations. What might be normal in one state is not normal in another. We have some key metrics that we try to hit. Most of our employees don't even know what they are. We try to not be too metrically driven. Don't let the metrics drive us. We got to let the people and the clients and the projects drive what we do. It's always amazing to me. Professional services business is extremely simple. High utilization, charge it to the job, bill it, don't write it off through a revenue adjustment, and control overhead. We try to have about 75% utilization for our production teams. That's total utilization. In office would be about 85%. About 2% revenue adjustments net, at the most. Support hours need to be about 11% or less of total hours. And if you do all that, you got a great business.
It is a simple business in that respect, for sure. So the last thing I just wanted to touch on, because we mentioned it a little bit early on, how do you preserve that culture? I joke that the culture maybe has changed. In reality, the culture probably hasn't changed at all. The climate and the operating environment has changed as you've grown, but talk a little bit about the culture and how you've kind of stuck to those core values as you've grown.
Yeah, my uncle, kind of something that he says that I've always really liked is he says, you can hire people that appreciate your culture, but that's not not good enough. You need to hire people that embody your culture. And the same goes with partnerships and acquisitions. Surround yourself, hire people that embody the culture, not just appreciate the culture. I think communication has been really important to our employees over the last couple of years. I'll do a quarterly town hall for kind of our upper 25% of the company. We do round tables, Christmas parties, picnics, walking through offices, constantly traveling. And, they just want to know what's going on. They're hungry for information. And actually, our turnover level is going down throughout this time that we've been expanding, which is the single most thing that I am proud of Pape-Dawson. It shows that our employees are engaged. They're excited for what we're doing. They understand why we're doing it. They trust the leadership. Turnover, I think, is a great measure of kind of what the employees feel about the company. And how they feel about the culture. So the communication is key. I think without that, we would have lost a little bit of the culture. But we're constantly on the road, just, reminding everybody of what our culture is, what we expect of everyone from our core value standpoint. We've been very blessed. Everybody has a unique culture, but I'm very proud of the culture of Pape-Dawson.
Any tips on assessing the cultural fit of the acquisitions, making sure that it's the right cultural fit?
Our average time to close is about 91 days from signing LOI to signing on the final line.
Yeah.
And you get to see everybody in their best and their worst during those times. It's very stressful for owners, but, we have certain safeguards in place. We do a lot of visits to the other firms. We almost, mandate that they come to San Antonio and have a 2-day thing with our leadership group and, dinners and you spend a lot of time with people throughout all of that. And I can, say with confidence, all but one, we made it to the finish line, but one just wasn't a great culture fit. And it was best for both firms to, kind of part ways. But yeah, you get to spend probably more time with the individuals during that process than you do with, your wife or kids or husband at home.
It's a tumultuous time for sure. Well, if anybody's listening and is considering selling the firm and you're in their footprint, or even if you're not, Pape-Dawson's the real deal for sure. And I hope you've heard from our discussions here, doing a lot of things right.
Well, by the way, all of our great ideas we've stole from our competitors. So, and we also always joke that we're absolute geniuses because we were born in Texas. I mean, that was a great springboard for us. But, some of these ideas are original, but, there's people much smarter than us that have done this. And by no means are we perfect, but I was happy to share all of the good things about Pape-Dawson with you all today.
You know what though, Trey? It's that focus on execution. Like you said, the business is pretty simple. There's not these huge kind of breakthrough ideas. It's just that relentless focus on having a vision and getting after it and just consistently executing and moving the ball down the field. Well, Trey, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Wow, what a fascinating growth story, huh? Lots of moving parts there. And again, like I said, that family piece, the rapid growth piece, but the sustained high performance piece. It's easy to lose that edge. You become very inwardly focused. You become slow, very bureaucratic, very policy laden. And what I think is remarkable is how they haven't done any of that. And they've continued to be a very nimble, lean, and obviously successful organization, which is great. Okay, now we're going to shift gears a little bit. Another segment that I want to feature in each episode of this broadcast, we always want to leave you with real specific tips and tricks and advice that you can implement right away. So that's the purpose of what I'm going to call the 5-minute fix. So we're going to have a segment here where our PSMJ Pro members, if you're a PSMJ Pro member, you know who you are. If you're listening, if you're not, I'll put a link in the show notes to learn more about the PSMJ Pro community. PSMJ Pro members have the opportunity to submit a question, and we will select one of those questions in the next episode to dig into, whether it's a business challenge, an opportunity, just a simple question, whatever the case may be. This is going to be a chance in 5 minutes, plus or minus. We will go through and try to tackle that question. So I took this from one of the episodes of the $10,000 Hour. Here was the question. We're finding that we need to supplement organic growth with acquisitions, but can't seem to find any good firms for sale. They all seem to have some sort of challenge that makes them a lot less desirable to us. How do we find those high-performing firms to acquire. And we heard that a little bit from Trey, and that's a very common story, that sometimes the firms you acquire bring a lot of fantastic talent. And certainly the last thing you want to do when you acquire a firm is to have to dump money into it to fund the operations, or you don't want to really get into turnarounds unless that's your jam. So how do we find the good ones? The first thing I will say on that is whether a firm is actively looking to sell is absolutely 100% completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Okay. In fact, a lot of CEOs, and I bet Trey would say the same thing, some of the best acquisitions they've made were from leadership teams that weren't actively considering external sales. So one is you got to kind of broaden your universe and make a list. Any firms that meet kind of the basic criteria, size, location, disciplines, that kind of stuff. Maybe some additional filters that you know about the type of work they do, but don't get too picky. You almost have to take a more of a pipeline approach in M&A. That one by one kind of, we found a firm that was actively for sale. We talked to them. It wasn't the right fit. We start over again. Is very slow and oftentimes doesn't yield very meaningful results because you're only looking at a small subset of the potential acquisition universe. Certainly talk to your principals, your project managers, others, firms that you should be talking to, that you should be looking at. In some cases, these may be firms where some of your principals or PMs worked at before they came to your firm. Talk to contractors, talk to subs, talk to everybody, and build this list, make it as big as you can of potential acquisition candidates. That's step one. Step two is to then do some outreach and have some conversation with those targets. Now, it can be tricky to do that if you're reaching out directly to those acquisitions because nobody wants to kind of admit that they're open to a conversation about sale. Even if you try to, there's some things you can do to disguise it as being just interested in partnering or something like that. Have an intermediary that does this outreach on your behalf. The goal there is you really just want to get an introductory meeting, right? This is really sales. It's really thinking about it in terms of a business development kind of pipeline. You find your targets, then you don't just say, hey, we want to buy your firm, right? That's not going to work. You got to kind of get to know them and find out what they're looking for. There's two pieces to this that I think are really, really important. Number one, you've got to explain what interests you about them. Okay. Don't be Johnny Appleseed and just, tell everybody you want to buy their firm. What specifically, take the time to articulate specifically in that initial outreach what you think about their firm is particularly interesting. Number two is you've also got to kind of articulate what about your firm can deliver some value for them. We had a client a few years ago, a buy-side M&A client that just did a fantastic job coming up with kind of a marketing piece, a two-sided 8.5 by 11 sheet. There was some fast facts about their firm and 5 ways that joining forces with their firm gets you more resources, more growth opportunities, more capital, all sorts of reasons why you got to make a pitch here a little bit and sell it. You can't sort of hold your cards and just say, why you got to sell to me and here's why. Typically, I would say estimate something like if you reach out to, 100 firms, let's say about half of them, about 50 will respond in some way, shape or form, but about half of those might be open to an introductory meeting. To learn more about the firm. Again, then you get into kind of what we call the 3-legged stool of merger and acquisition fit: strategic fit, cultural fit, financial fit. At first, you're really kind of measuring that strategic and cultural fit. The financial fit, that is to say, the valuation and deal structure, that comes later. The cultural fit is the most important piece. And by the way, also too, PSMJ's AEC Mergers and Acquisition Summit coming up in February 18th to the 20th at the PGA National Resort in West Palm. In Florida. So be sure to check that out if you want tips for a success, buy side or sell side. That's certainly something that's shaping our industry quite a bit. So that's it. That's episode 1. I hope you found it to be valuable. I hope you found a good nugget or two in there. I hope you see why we call it the AEC Growthcast, because we are all about growth in this show. If you want to hear more of this stuff, be sure to like, subscribe, follow, whatever your choice is there to make sure we're landing in your podcast. Until next time, get out there, get after it, and we will see you again on the next episode. Thank you.